مرحباً بكم مجدداً أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضورنا الكريم. تبدأ الآن الجلسة الثانية من قمة المعرفة.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Knowledge Summit.
الجلسة الثانية في هذه القمة وفي يومها الأول بعنوان الثورة الرقمية ودورها في تطور الإعلام ووسائل التواصل الاجتماعي.
We will now commence our second session themed The Digital Revolution and its role in traditional and social media.
يدير هذه الجلسة الإعلامية ومقدمة برامج كلام النواعم منى أبو سليمان، فلتتفضل إلى المنصة.
This session will be moderated by Muna Abu Suleiman. Please welcome on stage. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. We have a great panel that comprises of experts who see this important issue from different points of view. From the people who dream about the media, technology, and change, to the people who actually create it, to the people who use it, to the people who regulate it. I'm very honored to introduce Her Excellency Noor Al-Kaabi, Minister of State for Culture and Knowledge Development, Ministry of Community Development, who is also currently the CEO of the Media Zone Authority, Abu Dhabi. She also heads 2454, as well as somebody who has been named as one of the 30 most influential women in government in 2013. Ahlan wa sahlan. We also have with us Mr. Majid As-Suwaidi, who is the Managing Director of, perhaps I might have made a mistake. We have also with us Mr. Ludwig Plechier, who is the head of the Google Digital News Innovation Fund, and previously was the director of the FINP, a digital press fund for French publishers backed by Google. We also have Al-Akh Majid As-Suwaidi, who is the managing director of the Dubai Internet City and the Dubai Outsource Zone. Mr. As-Suwaidi has been very interested in ensuring the success of the small, medium enterprises, especially in content creation. Our fourth panelist is Mr. Larry Birnbaum, who is the Chief Scientific Advisor. He's a professor of computer science at Northwestern University and has received his computer science degree doctorate from Yale University in 1986. His research is in artificial intelligence and computer science, which includes natural language processing, case-based reasoning, machine learning, human-computer interaction.
Too much information.
I welcome him to the floor. Our last guest is Mr. Will Moy, who is the director of the Full Fact since 2010. He has been able to actually work for the non-party affiliated Peer Lord Law of Dalston and the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Transport Safety. Today we're looking at taking a dive into the digital revolution and its role in both traditional and social media. There is a lot of innovation and disruption that are currently changing the landscape of business and information as we, normal consumers, get it. From digitalization to radical increase in content to fake news to how do you monetize all of this information, both for the publishers, the content makers, and perhaps even in the future for the consumers who give their own information to these digital companies. This disruption is changing the way that we see the world, the way that we interact with the world. I'm very happy that we have such an esteemed panel with us. Let me start first by asking Her Excellency Noor Al-Kaabi about what is UAE doing for the digital landscape.
Thank you, Muna. Good morning, everyone. It's truly a great pleasure to be here at the Knowledge Summit. I truly thank the organizers for such an important gathering for us to exchange and discuss what's coming up next. It's a thrill to witness the new experiences we face in the digital age, and again, at the same time, this comes with a price as well. With regards to your question, Muna,
Thank you.
I believe that the UAE government is structured in a way also that it's putting itself in the forefront of technological development. With the new cabinet restructure or shuffle that happened recently, we're also looking at individuals who are representing us, and a Minister of Artificial Intelligence, a Minister of Advanced Science, and again, the cabinet, it's called the Cabinet of the Future. So you're looking at us also, members of the cabinet, looking into how the conversion is happening between the ways that are, maybe we'll call them traditional ways, and as I said, the conversion to technology and development. So how it can be in the forefront. This is where, again, there is a lot to be looked into. We have a year of innovation, and we have a day of innovation, and we're also measured in our jobs in terms of how we innovate when it comes to the work we do. Therefore, we're also looking at, let's say, a project, the Mars City, which was announced recently. And I believe we have 30 months to go to have a Mars City and to explore how will it be maybe to be in Mars. The ambition is there now. It's not being certain, but it's also exploring and empowering the youth, getting the government to work on such agenda, and then embedding that future agenda in everything we do.
This is when I said that we have the dreamers. I think the UAE has been extremely ambitious in some of its plans, but it gives you something to dream about. It gives you this kind of goal. Like, as you said, you guys have so many ministers who are interested in making sure that the dreams come true. And this is something that UAE has led the region in. Mr. Majid, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about how has the digital revolution impacted the region, and what are the learnings that you got from it, especially that you are the MD of the Dubai Internet City?
First of all, assalamu alaikum everyone, and good morning to everyone. A small tweak, I think, the small update. Now I'm the managing director for Dubai Media City, so very similar, very not far off. Yeah. So coming back to your question, I think it's very important to highlight that I think the digital revolution has taken everyone by a bit of a surprise. Although I think people saw certain guessing items that has come up in the past that would have resulted in what we are in today. Nevertheless, if we talk about the region and about what's happening here, we are fortunate to have gone through a major change, overhaul over the last 15, 16 years with the new vision that His Highness has put for the Dubai and the United Arab Emirates that was set with the idea of the digital revolution in mind. And then based on that kind of revolution idea, there were certain steps that have been put forward. And one of these steps was the creation of Dubai Internet City, which was going to be able to handle the technology-based companies that are passing through the region and hold them into the region. Today, I think, if we talk about my earlier role, I would say that Dubai Internet City today holds most of the major Fortune 500 companies within the region. Now, saying that, holding them is one part, but I think the reason, the ultimate reason behind attracting all of these companies today into Dubai or into the United Arab Emirates was to have a place where people would rub shoulders with technology revolutions, ideas, trends, and be up with the trends that we have. And as we've gone through all of these iterations in the past, we've seen huge changes that have happened. I think one of the major things that we've seen in the past was the reality of the fact that this part of the world didn't have that much of the digital revolution at that point of time. There wasn't much activity happening on the ground, whereas the world was moving at a faster pace at that time. So the strategies that were set is to build on the character and build on the people that are here. So the last few years was building the base for a creation of talent that could drive basically the idea of digital revolution to the next level. Now, fortunate also we are, is that we leap over certain trends that has other places used to go through them. So instead of going from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, we tend to go from stage 1 to stage 4, for instance. And this is, we are fortunate in that end because we are attracting the top talent from around the world.
Okay, so one of the statistics that came out of the Arab Media Report recently is that people in the region, on average, spend 10.9 hours per day on media, traditional and social, increasingly mobile. Can you tell us a little bit more about the content creation and how organizations can work to ensure that the content of those 10 hours is actually something that can help the region versus the amateur videos that we're seeing and perhaps to Majid, the question.
Okay. So
things that you're doing to help those organizations create great content.
So from our end, what we've seen is that in the last few years, coming back, I think we'll talk a little bit of history quite a bit here, is that there was a lot of amateur content available on the web. But also this amateur content wasn't strong enough or did not meet the minimum standard of value-created content. So what we did is that we created some kind of an understanding with all of this, our business partners across all the industries that we deal with. And we deal with media, we deal with technology companies, and we deal with universities, academia, and others. And we've actually tried to instill a new vision that would result in creating more valuable content for the public. This required us to also invest in a lot in equipment, in development, in strategies, where we tracked most of these creative content. And I think Google was one of the first supporters to this idea. And I think this was one of the sparks that we had with one of the, I don't know if it was Eric Schmidt, but someone at that point of time was discussing how much the Arabic content was available on the web in 5-6 years ago, which was a fraction. So it's a fraction of a percentage. And that was the driver for all of these changes that have happened.
And we're still working on it. Making great content in Arabic is one of the most important strategies to go forward in a digital age. Ludwig, you are the head of the Google Digital News Innovation Fund. What do you mean Digital News Innovation Fund? Explain that first for us.
So I'm happy to explain, but I'm going to step back a little bit and explain that I'm a former journalist and also a business person and product person in newsroom. So I really try to be in publisher's shoes, and I'm part of those people that think like you, that we are living absolutely amazing time talking about content creation. In terms of opportunities, the reach has never been that big due to the platform, to the job we are doing all together, and how news are today the power of social, the power of platform. And that is great opportunity for publishers, for journalists, for newsmakers. The thing is also that at this point to produce great content, back to your question, you have to change the way you are producing content. You have to reshape your way you are doing journalism. And all that is about reinventing yourself, finding new recipes to distribute the content, to frame the content, to find new templates, new way of storytelling. And of course, we are part and we want to be part of this transformation and to help. So what we've done in Europe, and it started there, but we are learning from what we are doing, so everyone will benefit from that. So
But this is about the innovation fund. Yes, the
so
fund.
this innovation fund is all about stimulation and helping the news publishers to take risk. They're taking risks and test new things. So it's a 150 million euro effort from Google for projects that demonstrate new thinking in the practice of digital journalism and the creation of new business models. Because of course, the way you are producing content has to be reshaped, but also the business model. And we are really part of it. We are collaborating and partnering with publishers. And there are examples through this initiative. This initiative is based on 3 pillars. The first one is about product. And product that has been designed by Google engineers that are not benefiting everyone, like accelerated mobile pages. You have it here as well. It's an open source framework that helps loading the page, accelerating the loading of the page.
So basically the fund is looking at how Google products that you guys are creating can also help these projects that you are funding to ensure that there is this kind of collaborative content creation.
So the Digital News Initiative is broader than the fund. It's based on 3 pillars. One is product. The other one is research and training, training in newsroom, training newsroom to Google products to help them gathering data, working on news story. And the third pillar is only about innovation, and this is the fund. The fund, it's project done by publishers, supported by Google, but it's still the publisher's project. They own the IP. We are not investing, we are giving. And through this fund, we can see the new trends, the new opportunities that are flying around. And that's very interesting because it also helps to understand what does innovation mean when you are talking about news. Actually, no one knew really what is innovation. It's hard to define innovation. How would you define innovation? Actually, innovation is a process. We receive in 1 year and a half more than 3,000 applications, and we selected 359 projects for 73 million euros. With those amazing numbers, we see the interest of publishers to try new things, but also the diversity of topic. We have many kinds of applicants, from bloggers, publishers, broadcasters, online-only players, and the topics are going from fact-checking, investigation, blockchain, how technology, the blockchain is the backbone technology of the digital currency, the Bitcoin.
And we're going to come back to blockchain because it's a very important new trend. So here we have the governments pushing for a technology, actually creating the areas where people can use technology companies coming in and saying, we're not only creating products, but we're working with the publishers to ensure content. The problem is there's been massive content coming out of the internet, and part of it is fake news. Part of it has been very problematic because it can actually manipulate people's opinions in very important points of their lives, and we've seen this before. In 2017, I think this has been, the word fake news has been the trending topic of the world. So I want to talk to Will a little bit more about fake news, the distinction between fake news for money and fake news for manipulation, and what can be done to limit that.
Okay.
With Will.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. You're absolutely right that fake news has become a dominant global conversation over the last couple of years, and also that actually to have a helpful point of view on it, it's much more helpful to break that concern into its component problems, which are solvable. So one of the problems that was noticed during the US election last year was that people were creating websites with completely made up stories on them that looked like news that weren't, simply in order to attract people to those websites and get the advertising revenue from having all those visitors. One of the iconic examples of that was teenagers in Macedonia making up these websites simply to make money. And that's one example of completely fake news. But actually it's an extreme, and it's a relatively solvable problem. The advertising networks, the big ones, Google and Facebook, were able to intervene to change their advertising rules to make it harder to make money out of that sort of content. Unfortunately, that has shifted some of these producers onto other advertising networks, but the purely financially motivated making up of stories is something that can be tackled by tackling the economic incentives around it. Then you move on to the whole range of what can be described as fake news. Because actually, over the last year or so, we've begun to see everything from made-up stories of the sort I just described to satire, which is poking fun at major events being described as fake news, and even legitimate questions from the media being described as fake news by people in positions of power. So the term fake news is so broad that it's an unhelpful diagnosis for anything. The area where fake news is the area where I think there is really interesting problems is the making up of content in order to manipulate opinion and in order to drive political events and political currents of thought.
And I think this is what a lot of people are worried about. What are the efforts to actually stop this that you're aware of, and what is perhaps the best way to do it? I mean, I remember a long time ago, so everybody here has shared fake news, whether it's on WhatsApp or on Facebook. You see something that seems interesting and you share it. A long time ago, it used to be with pamphlets. I remember when I was younger, you would get these weird things. Somebody اتمسخ بسبب ما قرأ مدري إيش صار شيء, and it was fake news, but people didn't understand the reach. Now with media, the reach is everywhere, and every single one of us has done it. And the issue is when it's actually vicious, when it's actually used to tear countries apart, to increase racist attitudes, or actually manipulate election results. And so the distinction is important, but also the way to combat it is important. Yeah. If you can elaborate on that.
Well, let's start by thinking about the various people involved in this scenario. On the one hand, I've been really glad to hear the emphasis on education in the morning so far. Clearly, one of the big opportunities to tackle people being able to be manipulated by false information is better education, making people more aware of how information can be manipulated online and more able to think critically about what they're seeing. And in the last few months, we've seen the public release of tools that can create completely faked video based on only a small sample of people on video before. So probably based on just enough video created from this session, it would be possible to create fake videos of the speakers in this session. So we are entering a world where no content can necessarily be trusted unless you can trace it back to a provable source. So education is crucial there. Then at the other extreme, we have this phenomenon of state-sponsored disinformation, which has become a real concern in international relations, and that will have to be tackled in conversations between countries. And the bit in the middle is where civil society organizations like Full Fact and media organizations and online platforms like Google can work. So Google's Digital News Innovation Fund funded the prototype of Full Fact's automated fact-checking work. We have created tools that can automatically recognize people repeating claims that we have previously fact-checked and flag that in real time. That means that we can intervene much more quickly when claims are repeated. Because one of the observations we can make is that actually most of us don't take things in the first time we see them. The reason advertising repeats itself is because you have to see things time and time again in order for them to really make an impact. And therefore, fact-checking can intervene to try to stop the spread of claims by identifying them early when they spread and ask for corrections. The other thing we're doing, the second tool we're building off the same platform, is called Trends. It's looking at the spread of claims over time. And the idea of that is to let us see who is responsible for spreading misinformation and what happens when we intervene to try to stop it, so we can assess the impact of our attempts to fact-check and stop misinformation.
This is also very important because now we're talking about humans actually doing this. Larry, I want to talk a little bit about the fear because of the fourth industrial revolution and how much it seems like machines are going to be replacing humans, that we're going to start actually having all these robot authors, machines that will imitate people's ways of expression to make fake news or make content that is totally machine-made. There's a fear of that. And I know that you're an expert on this issue.
Well, thank you for having me here today. If I can follow up quickly on, first of all, on Will's point, there are organizations like Fullfax and others in the United States that are aimed at the automatic detection of falsehood, basically online, and flagging it. And I think that's incredibly important, especially to prevent people who, care about their own reputation from forwarding things that they now have found to be false. Still, the reality of fake news is that it's not just false, it's aimed specifically to incite people in a certain way, and it has a kind of emotional quality. It's aimed at actually evoking certain feelings in certain kinds of people. So I worry that even if we can actually tag something automatically as not true, it may not have its intended effect on helping people to sort of reject that information. I've come to think more and more that what I would love to have is a meter that tells me this thing you're reading right now was aimed directly at you. It was weaponized to sort of incite you, and I think that might arouse my concerns about being manipulated in a way that would be useful. So that's the kind of research direction I'm interested in. Going back to your original question, the automatic generation of news stories or of any story is in its infancy, but is certainly gaining ground. The technology that we developed at Northwestern, and which is being further developed and marketed by the company Narrative Science, is aimed at taking data and turning those data into stories to convey to people. And the purpose really is to make the world's data meaningful to people through stories at scale. And in general, I think given all the data that we have around us and that we're hoping to try and understand to make sense of the world around us, I'm hoping that will be a positive step towards making the data that we have usable by people. To make that work, of course, it has to operate at scale, which means it has to be personal. It has to be something that you care about. So rather than one story for many people, we're talking about a story for you around your data, your kids' baseball game or soccer game, your personal financial situation or health situation. And those applications obviously appear very, not just benign, but positive, really, and incredibly useful to people. As the technology progresses, if you ask, how do we, vouchsafe ourselves against, sort of algorithmic manipulation by people who will sort of spin those data in ways that are aimed at, again, really misleading us. I think that's going to be definitely a big technical challenge. I think the good news is that a lot of technology has the possibility with it of being, in some sense, of auditability or traceability. In other words, when a machine tells us something, I think we have the right to ask the question, okay, tell me why you said that. What was your reasoning behind that? What were the facts that you drew on in order to actually convey this information to me? And to the extent that we build technology that is transparent in this way and can explain its reasoning to people, I think we have a better shot of avoiding the kinds of manipulation that you were talking about at the beginning.
Well, I'm going to move a little bit from the manipulation of media and robots as authors into something else that we're also afraid of. We're afraid of how the nature of employment is going to be changing. And social media has changed the nature of employment. I wanted to know if Her Excellency, Noura, can tell us a little bit more about how has social media changed employment in the Middle East, perhaps even in the United Arab Emirates?
Okay, well, I mean, of course, I mean, with social media, it just dictated the way so there, I mean, the social media made people curate their content, and again, at the same time, you know, have the citizen journalism. You know, if it's a video, if it's music, if it's a talent, if it's a dance, if it's a cooking show, if it's whatever it is. I think with the social media, people are now the curators. With the Middle East and with the phenomena that is happening with social media, is it's also happening somewhere else. That influencers are dictating now how to market for the products. Influencers are the ambassadors, and they're also being hired by big telcos, by small companies, from a cupcake business to an airplane business. So it's more of how social media is and companies and marketing is adapting that curating of content and that individual base of a celebrity and the influencers and how it goes out. The point is, and talking about social media, is how different countries, and especially I believe in the US, is how it kind of regulated, and you understand when an influencer is marketing for a product and how it's a sponsored advertisement. When it's sponsored, you know it's sponsored, other than the other way around, where around here in the region, it's still not clear yet. They will advertise for it and they will place it in their social media accounts. But again, the measurements are kind of not working the same way we feel they're supposed to. An example is if a social media influencer has to declare it's an advertisement, then if they will drive traffic to a website, some of the proceedings will go to that influencer. We need to work on a mechanism to monetize that. To monetize that, it will help us to regulate that in a way that will enable the business and not hurdle the business. But it will be a fair proposition for the social media influencer and for the entity that will also want to get the product out there. So this is when we talk about social media and marketing. And now we talk about social media and news, and as you mentioned, the fake news. And I'm happy to hear about Google's digital journalism. What I would like to highlight in this region, we are in a place where we see hope, we dream. We want the majority of our population, who are the youth, to live in a better place than today, to be able to celebrate exporting the last barrel of oil while they're very much capable of living a sustainable life. How do we do that? Is again, at the same time, our investment has to go to entities that we know that are not driving their own agenda. They're not driving the hate speech. They're not driving extremism. They're not driving sectarian kind of spirit in such situations. And we have them in the region. So I believe that we're very much blessed to be in a country that has the majority of the top 500, as Majid mentioned, and be in a country also that welcomes such big companies. Yet again, at the same time, it's also important to understand the culture, the religion, the kind of speech, and what are the values that we want to make sure that we instill when it comes to social media and the influencers with social media. So I'm just calling for the investment to go to the entities that are that they believe that the values, it's not based on a religion. Values are based on humanity values, based on values that will make me after 10 years, maybe when I retire one day, to feel very comfortable to see my niece being able to live a better life than today.
So this is a very interesting point of view, and it comes from the policymaker who has to look at every segment of society. And we talked about employment a little bit in the beginning when you were talking about marketing and how revenue is important. Well, there's a new type of revenue that people have been talking about, which is basic universal income, where the government gives money to each citizen, no matter what age, according to a certain standard of living, so that people would actually be, have a dignified life. If we change this idea from the old world, which is where the government comes in and helps people, to the new world idea where you actually become the person in charge of your destiny. And so there's a new idea of a basic universal income that looks at companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, where you're giving them all your information for free so far, and basically to try to develop an algorithm where whenever they're using your information or they're getting your information, they pay you back. So I wanted to understand if this is something that Google is grappling with as a form of income, not employment so much, but income.
So first, what I am doing at Google is not working on the product part, but really empowering publishers to work on their own product. And what is interesting to notice is that there are no building initiative and collaborating all together, trying to have collaborative effort helped by Google through our initiative to work better on their own data and to be able to make first the life of their readers and customers better, but also to create new opportunities for generation of new revenue stream. I will take one example funded by the Innovation Fund. We are in Portugal, and 80% of the mainstream publishers were not talking to each other that much. They decided, especially for our initiative, to come with a collaborative project that is a single sign-on, which means when you register to sign on for a newsletter or to subscribe on one of these websites, you are also recognized in another one from another publisher. So no difference to recognize the user, the reader, between those different brands. It creates for them amazing opportunities to reduce the complexity, to transform a reader into a most valuable subscribers, to increase the consumption, to gain attention, which is absolutely key today, and to sell bundles. Those kind of initiatives are really helpful for the ecosystem, game-changing for them, and we are part of it. So we are collaborating with that.
So let me go back to the original question.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of discussion at all at Google at looking at passive consumers? Basically, as I'm using the net, Google gathers information about me. Is there any discussion about that being something that would benefit me financially in the future?
So again,
not you, but in Google, like in
yeah, okay, but I'm not part of.
So you don't know if there was a.
I'm really focused on empowering the publisher and building the bridges between us and the publishers. It also goes with a certain level of dedication to what they are doing only and separation with the product.
Well, thank you for that. Majid, I want to go back to the Dubai Media City. And as we know, Dubai is the city of the future. What are the futuristic plans for media that you're looking into?
Well, I think it's, from where we stand today, I think we're in a very interesting position between businesses, between the government, between other players within this industry. So our focus, I think, if we can put it in this, our focus in the next phase, and so we started with, if I can give you a little bit of history too, we started with the idea of attracting companies into the United Arab Emirates. So that's the basics. So we're bringing people in, we get people the chance to operate out of Dubai to the region, and that created the infrastructure that we have today. Now we are moving away from that into the next phase. The next phase is basically to create companies out of the region, for the region. So today we believe that the best person or the most successful companies that will be created in the region are companies that know the localities or know the region much better than their counterparts maybe around the world. Not to say that there are no successful companies that are operating out of other parts of the world that could do the same job, but we believe that the region needs to create its own businesses. So the next phase is all about creation of value, creation of companies, creation of content producers, creation of opportunities for people to start growing and building up their businesses out of the region. So it's very critical that the cities today are focused on how we can make it even better for people to build and to create. So our next drive will always be around this creation of whatever it is. So content producers.
Whatever technology takes you, you're going to be there.
I think technology is a vehicle. And the technology is not the hardest part of the equation at the moment. Now you find there are so many technologies that were developed for a certain reason, and they're actually doing something else today. So today, I think the more important, instead of thinking of what the technologies that we could get, it's more important where do we want to get and what do we want to get in the future. And based on that, we use the best technologies. So if we come and say, we would like to create content, then we would start saying, okay, what are the tools that we require? So technology is a tool now that could be adjusted to any kind of situation that we are in at the moment.
I totally agree with that. I do think the creativity of the human being is actually what drives everything.
Definitely, yes.
In the end.
That is 100%.
Larry, you are on the cutting edge of computer science and changes that are happening. And there's a lot of excitement and also fear around the fourth industrial revolution. Can you tell me what are you most excited about and what are you most afraid of?
Thanks for that easy question. What I'm excited about is that I think the automation of a lot of knowledge work and other kinds of tasks that human beings are currently doing can certainly lead to a richer, safer, and more fulfilling world. I think there's no question about that. I mean, I don't work on this, but if you think about self-driving cars, cars are a public health problem right now just due to the number of people who are killed in automobile accidents. And if you think about the lives that could be saved through technology there and the development of really safe driving, that would be an amazing gift to the world, really, and in terms of, maybe it wouldn't be curing cancer, but it would certainly be, eliminating a great cause of death and suffering in the world. The work I do isn't nearly so fraught or impactful in that way, but I think that, again, helping people to understand the world around them. I mean, we're now flooded with data. There's no point in gathering and analyzing it if people can't understand it. And so the tools that we're working on to automatically help people understand the data around them, I think, could be a tremendous boon to all of us. The fear is, what will be the meaningful activities for human beings, obviously, and I think the meaningful activities for human beings is to interact with other human beings. I mean, I think that's the meaning, and I think that I was just listening to Her Excellency's talk about dance or sort of personal content creation. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the idea that people will do the things that they love to do that give meaning to their lives and share them with other people, and that the basis of in some sense human economic activity is going to be these very personal transactions around things that you make for other people or things that you do for other people in a very personal sense, as you would do them now for your friends. I mean, the United States right now, this may sound a little down the road, but artisanal food, for example, and the whole farm-to-table movement has become a big deal in in how we eat food out. It's not, and so the whole purpose of that is to decommodify everything along the way and make it personal again. So I guess my hope and dream is that as computers begin to automate sort of the commodity work, we're free to do the work of which is much more interpersonal and less transactional.
Part of that is also, when you look at media, is how how digital media has disrupted traditional media, and the rise of the citizen journalist, with its challenges and opportunities. I wanted Ludwig and Will to actually talk a little bit about both of those issues, as well as the training of journalists, whether you're a citizen journalist or a normal journalist. Ludwig, if you could.
So citizen journalist and journalist. It's a really professional and amateur relationship, right? And at some point we say everyone can be a journalist. I don't think it's true. It's like a robot. Robot can help, can do part of the job, but it's actually an opportunity to be even better and to go even more in depth in what you are doing. So it will always be a collaboration. Journalism, you need some skills to do that. And that goes with training. You need to be able to find exclusive content. You need to be able to figure out what are the right questions to ask, like you are doing immediately. And this it requires some training and best practices. What is different today is that everyone can engage with journalists. So you can work together, you can be challenged, and the story never stops. When you finish your story, it goes out, then you have follow-up. You are challenged by someone that can be even more expert than you are. So you have to always put yourself in danger as a journalist and be able to provide answer, to double check, to update, which makes your job more complicated, but is also the fascinating things with the new relationship with the audience, which is always improving yourself and going even more in depth. So I see that not as a street or as a competition, but as something that is really game-changing, but in a positive way for both parts.
So it can be positive, but also because of the rise of citizen journalists, anybody who has a telephone becomes a journalist, a content maker, somebody who is a witness to events. It has disrupted the monetization model of the news industry. We have lost a tremendous number of citizens in the journalists because of citizen journalists in the past 5 years. And yet you're saying we need the journalists to be trained. So with Will, what are the issues, the challenges that you see because of this new model that is happening, because of the lack of income that is coming to the traditional journalists, while the need for verification rises at the same time?
Well, I suppose I'd start by saying that although we've spent the session talking about the challenges of new communications technology, fundamentally we live in a time of enormous opportunity, and it's grasping that opportunity which is the biggest challenge of all. But that said, the fact that full fact exists is interesting. A generation ago, you would expect media outlets to have internal fact-checking teams, teams of experts, and what we have seen in the UK and I think elsewhere in the world is that there are fewer media outlets trying to produce more content over more channels in less time with less specialist reporters and journalists. And that means that it is harder to do the in-depth reporting that has made journalism such an important public service. And actually the relatively shallow reporting of here is a picture of an event that just happened does require scale. It requires a Reuters to be able to do that anywhere in the world. It requires a major news agency to be able to do that even within one country. And to some extent, having citizens on the scene with cameras on their phones can jump in to that. What it can't do is the next step, which is stitching together that event in one place with who was responsible in a company, a government agency, or wherever else, and what is the long-term story over a month, 3 months, 6 months. That requires sustained investment, and as Ludo says, it also requires skills. So in our fact-checking team, we have a trained economist, social researcher, lawyer, statistician. We need a whole range of skill sets simply to get to the bottom of important statements in public life. If you expand that out to telling the story of international relations, the level of in-depth knowledge and personal connections you need to be able to tell those stories well is huge. And so I think it's exciting that we have a richer view of what is going on in the world than we have ever had before, partly through data and partly because every citizen can publish. But a deeper view, a more in-depth view, actually requires people to spend time and therefore money on it. And the problem is, where does that money come from?
Noura, you're also on the board of the Abu Dhabi media. So where's the money coming from for investigative reporting? Is this something that you guys are concerned about, that you're working for? I know there's a lot of beautiful things coming out of Dubai, but in particular, as Will and Ludwig said, the investigative reporting element.
A good question, Mona, because I personally encourage more of having more efforts, especially with journalists, and the investigative reporting is so important as well. As more of, unfortunately, most of the time, seeing it as a transactional process. So you're seeing journalists in maybe 10 events during the day, and it's a very straightforward questions, Q&As. Yet again, what we're missing here, we're missing the depth, we're missing the analysis, we're missing the economist, the sports analysis. Instead of being analyzing sports, maybe debating, and there are certain fights in sports, and then you move to the other areas and the other genres. But let's move back and look at what will dictate the future of our content, whether it's a journalist or it's a TV show or it's an animation. So yesterday we launched Nat Geo Kids All in Arabic channel from Abu Dhabi Media, and what is a celebration for the Kids International Day, and again Children International Day, but again at the same time, it's how children who love science, who love space, who are in schools and enjoy such subjects can be the stars in a TV show. So from that, you get those students, you get the likes of Ali Al-Mansouri, and you get her in front of the TV. She will speak about her innovation, and again, at the same time, she will inspire others. So how can you get children to be part of the content creation? How you can get youth to vet also, and tell them, okay, you vet factual checking. If this is fake news or this is news, you give them the tools. So how digital and media literature should be part of our education process. Now, what we do in media companies, we always fall in the traditional trap, the trap of the hundreds of cameras, studios, static kind of process, and then work on a grid. And then we ask ourselves questions. How many hours do you spend a day in front of a TV screen? How many hours do you spend a day, as you started today, in front of your mobile screen? So what dictates journalists, and I, again, empower investigative journalism, more analysis, more depth, and also encouraging what Ludwig is doing with Google. I feel it's how we adapt it and how we have a content that is, has a target audience. The audience will dictate, not the fizzy drink, not the advertisement, although we will get our money from advertisement. But I feel what's happening right now, that audience are changing the way we measure things. They're changing the way companies are operating. The media is changing the landscape. So how can we empower that? By the content that fits audiences, from children to adults to analysis to politicians to whatever it is, but work on a more of in-depth. And a very quick note, youth, won't mind paying for a good content.
I think everybody doesn't mind paying for good content as long as you can find it. Larry, on the topic of good content and investigative reporting, I remember reading a few weeks ago that within 5 years, robots will be able to write essays for high schoolers. So you no longer need to plagiarize. You can just get the robot to write you the essay. How much longer, and is it possible for a robot to do what Will said, to spend the time and do an actual investigative, in-depth report, like the ones that we would read in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, or NPR, watch it on NPR?
So the approach to artificial intelligence that I take is typically founded on starting with what's doable, which will be working with human beings so that the machine takes on the component of the task that it's capable of doing, and the person is really working with the machine to actually do the things that people are best for. And as we improve technology, the components of who's doing what may shift, but I think fundamentally that the model of the future is really going to be one where human beings and machines interact with each other in productive ways to actually do things together that neither of them individually would be able to do. And so I think that the machine's strengths are going to be things like the vast amount of information at its disposal immediately, and the ability to process that information very quickly and synthesize it perhaps. The human being will bring an understanding actually of values and what are the questions that need to be asked here, which I think that's the hardest part if you think about it for a machine right now is what's important to a machine. What will it want to know about? What will the questions be? Now I think that as machines work with people, in some sense we will model that for them and they might become better at that. But I think overall I think the picture of the future is one of partnership. The essays that are going to be written automatically, or that can be written automatically, I think they're going to be worth exactly, to both the student who chooses that course and to the person who reads it will be worth, exactly nothing. So, I think much more interesting than that would have been, how about having the machine have a conversation with that kid about the topic and help work with the kid to synthesize the report so that maybe some of the things that the student finds drudgery or difficult go away, but the fun part and the part that really is around understanding the ideas and asking the right questions comes to the fore as the thing that is the part of the task that the student focuses on.
And I think that the children that are growing up now with technology will feel a lot more comfortable having maybe a bot chat, they call it, where you're actually chatting with a computer that can help you, as you said, with the drudgery parts of the essays or of the thinking.
Right.
Majid, Her Excellency talked about looking at how consumers are changing the media landscape, that they're the ones now who are driving the content. And yet there's always going to be a need for content that is uncomfortable, that pushes the boundaries, that is difficult, so that we as a society can grow. And usually these don't make money. You're an expert in the technology startup arena. Can you tell us, is there a way for people who want to be able to provide the foundations of knowledge, things that may be not monetized, still can have a space in Media City or in the future city?
Well, I don't believe there is anything that doesn't make money.
Oh, I like that.
That's the starting statement. So I believe there is always a way to monetize something. Maybe not now, but maybe down the line. But it could be monetized one way or another. You could see that a lot of companies have started with no monetization for 10 years, and then they started making millions after that. So the strategy is always what the person wants to create. And like Her Excellency is saying, I think it's jumping into that area is very important. Self-regulation, self-understanding of what you want to do, and putting these questions in mind. You've highlighted a very important aspect. As society starts, and I'm not an expert in society, but talking about it from a business standpoint, I think as we get into new areas, uncharted land that we weren't living in the past, we will always fall into uncomfortable situations, and we'll have people that will start working in uncomfortable business scenarios. Nevertheless, this uncomfortable situation at the initial phase will always be a little bit more easier to work with as you grow into that business. Looking at what we had 50 years ago and looking at where we are today, I think we've been through a lot of uncomfortable situations, yet change is always uncomfortable. Change is always something that requires you to go to have a strong heart, and you will actually jump into it when you have to do it. And I think today this is the same attitude that we see with all of our startups, for instance. All areas are either taken or businesses that are not available. And I think there was a report earlier, by His Highness was talking about jobs not being available today that could be available in the future. So we need to gear up for the new challenges in the future. And I think in business it's no different. We see a lot of changes happening. We see that there are interesting spaces that are coming up. We see that there are opportunities that are coming up. The strategy differs on how you want to achieve that. And I think today we have a huge number of supporters of the industry, whether they are mentors, whether they are creators, whether they are serial entrepreneurs, that could help in making the society even further. I think the growth happens to everyone when it happens.
I want to thank my panelists for being here, for giving us diverse points of view on a very important issue that we're all living, how the digital revolution is changing media, whether it's social or traditional. A lot of times when people talk about media, I compare it to a smoothie. A smoothie is a very beautiful drink that that's easy to digest. It has a lot of nutrients. But in the end, you have to look at the blender. You have to look at what you're putting in the blender and the speed of what the blender does. So we are actually in a blender right now, media-wise. Everything that we have known has changed and is changing. And yet, everything that we also have known is still the same. We need information to make decisions to have a better life. How we get that information, how we manipulate it, how we fact-check it, how we create it, how we support it, is going to be the issue of the 21st century. And I do hope that all of our panelists enjoyed the talk as much as I did. I learned a lot. And I think I'm going to be applying to a Google Fund initiative right now. Azai, there's going to be another session after the coffee break. I hope that we will be able to see you and mingle with you afterwards for any questions that you have, because unfortunately the time has finished and we cannot take any questions from the audience. Thank you very much.